Hey guys, so we're going to do a couple of quick composites, just cutting out and placing into a background here. So I've got this picture of a woman at what looks like some sort of Renaissance festival. She's dressed up in period garb, and I've got this picture from Italy, which looks like some sort of like, Verdant hillside with a little building in the side. So I thought this would be a good little thing to kind of drop this in here. But the big thing here is obviously we have to cut this person out, but we also have to make kind of like a adjustments for the fact that she's in very sort of white balanced light. She's in sort of clear white daylight, and this right here is in sort of a sunset scene where it's very yellow, and you can sort of see the shadows kind of forming and whatnot. So we're going to see if we can't make some adjustments here. So let's start off by cutting out. Now, first off, let me just real quick open this up, and I just want to show you something in the picture information here. So let me just go to File Info. And we can see that this picture is 3,000 pixels across and 4,000 pixels high, right? So it's a pretty big photo. And we look at this picture here. Let me put this one up. And I'll just once again file info, and we can see that this one's only 1920 by 1290, right? So this picture, the background, is a good deal smaller than what we're going to drop in, and that's very important. We never want to drop in something smaller into something bigger that we're going to have to resize. If ever we want to scale something, we always want to scale it down. We never want to scale it up. Because when we scale it up for raster images, it's going to lose its resolution. It's going to start getting pixelated. So make sure that you keep that in mind and that you are aware of how big the picture is that you're taking or how big the picture is that you're working with. So let's go ahead and drop this woman in here. And there's a lot of different ways to cut things out, but I've always found the quickest way is to start off with a magnetic lasso and just to go around the outside. And you can sort of click every so often to, find the sort of spots that are difficult for it to pick up. All right, we can double click, oops. All right, and so once we have that, right, we can either do one of two things. We can hit this little button up here that says Add to Selection, and we can kind of zoom in a little bit and sort of spot, sort of clean up the different areas that we kind of missed before. And for example, right here, we can hit this little button that says Subtract from Selection, where I can sort of move around the areas where we don't want it to be selected. We want that out of the selection. So let me just kind of go through. And clean this up a little bit. All right. And so for things that haven't quite worked out, we can grab our pen tool and make sure our pen tool is set to path up here. And from there, we can just click and drag and make little paths that we can then right-click and say Make Selection and just make sure we check Add to Selection. Same thing goes up here. These areas where the sort of pale skin tends to blend in with the pale background here. And so if we want to, take something out of the selection, we can do the same sort of steps here. And we can make selection and just subtract from selection, as you can see there. So you hold down Control, you can move the direction lines around. Recall that. And when you don't actually have to complete the path, you can just make the selection and then add to selection, and it'll actually just sort of make the path for you here. Now with this right here, I can see I have this tiny little peak right there. I don't want that, so I'm just going to get my quick mask on by pressing Q on the keyboard, and with my brush tool selected, I'll just click there and see if I can erase that with black selected. If I put black, that means it's not going to be selected. All right, and I'll kind of go through in here and I'll clean up this as well. And any wispy hairs you can probably leave out because we're going to zoom out a good deal. Let me get the brush to be a little harder. I don't want it to be quite so fuzzy on these selections here. White, and I'll just sort of clean that up a little bit. And I just want any sort of like obvious bits of the background to be taken out here. All right, I'll take off the quick mask for now, and I'll just see if I can clean this up a little bit further with the pen tool, and you can speed through this if you like. Just advance forward until you see I've done with this. And obviously, the simpler the path, the more exact it's going to be. All right. It's getting quick mask here being used to clean up the little tiny spots here or there, and then we'll just get my path tool here and make sure that the bottom side is all cleaned up. You can make the path out of the canvas here, but you have to click inside right click inside the canvas to make selection. And we'll do the same over here. Make selection, add a selection. Selection, subtract selection. Okay, and then with that done, what we can do is just take our marquee tool, M on the keyboard, little rectangular marquee tool, right click on it, and say layer via copy. And that way we have this thing cut out. So that's good. All right, so we'll come back in a second and we'll put it into the background here. Okay, so we've got this thing cut out, and what we're going to do now is we're going to drop it into our background here. So let's go ahead and grab the background, find it in your file, Explorer here. There it is. And if we were just to sort of drag and drop, it would just show up as being placed embedded inside this. So we're just going to right-click on it and say Open With, and then we can probably find Photoshop CC everything. So that's good. If you don't find that, you can just go to File, Open, and then just find the file that you're looking for. You obviously have to remember where you saved it, so keep that in mind. All right. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll just drag this layer here, and we'll just drag it on top of that tab and just drop it on in. And as you can see, it's gigantic, which is good. So I'm going to zoom out a little bit and then press the Move tool here. And if you don't see these little bars up here, make sure this little Show Transform Controls is clicked. And we'll just hold down Shift. That's very important. Hold down Shift to make sure that your not a caps lock, I was just doing to make sure that your proportions are constrained here. And I might make this a bit smaller here. Now, one thing you'll notice about this picture here is that it is it's sort of cut off on the sides here, right? So it's cut off here and it's cut off on the bottom. So we can't have it floating, and we can't have this little cut off side hanging out there. So we've got to do one of two things. We either have to place it on this side with its, shall we say, with the cutoff side against the edge of the page here, or we have to get our move tool here, and we have to right-click on it, rather get our click on the side there to click on the little side so we can start resizing it, so that the transform controls open up, and then right-click on it and just sort of flip horizontally, one or the other. Now you'll notice something about this is that it's actually the light in this is coming from this side. So we kind of we probably want it on this side, but the only problem is that we're kind of blocking our little house back there. So I think it's a little more interesting. So I'm just going to flip it horizontally one more time here and just kind of put it on the side, and we'll see if we can adjust that. So the first thing we'll do is we'll turn this into a smart object. So I'm just going to right-click on this and say Convert to Smart Object, and that's going to allow us to do some adjustments without making any destructive changes. So we'll be able to adjust those as we go along. And the first thing I'll do is I'm going to change the color temperature of this. So I'm going to go down here to my adjustments layer, so this little button down here, and I'm going to click on New, and I'm going to click on Curves. Curves, pull that out. And then I'm going to make sure this is a clipping mask by holding on Control and clicking between the two layers here. Oops. Rather Alt. I'm going to hold on Alt. And see this little icon up here is the square with a little arrow there. I'm going to click on that. And so it's only going to affect that layer there. Okay, so with that done, I'm going to go to let's see here. I'm going to select this little, the layer here. I'm going to make sure I'm picking up on the little half moon picture, not the mask, the clipping mask here, but the actual adjustment layer. And I'm going to go over here to where it says Auto, and I'm going to hold down Alt. I'm going to click on Auto. And that's going to bring up these controls over here, the Auto Color Correction options. And let's see if I can't click on the Fine Dark and Light Colors. So when I find the dark and light colors, it's going to allow me to click on, say for instance, shadows, and I'm going to be able to sort of pick a target here. So this is the dark colors, so I'm going to click on sort of the darkest color I could find here, which could either be these trees, or it could be this little hillside here, right? Maybe over here. And then I'm going to go over here, I'm going to find the midtones, and I'm going to find like a slightly less dark color. So say for instance, maybe this color back here. And then on my highlights, I'll find this sort of gold color here. Sort of maybe this blue color here. Be good. All right, press OK. And what I'm going to do, I'll press OK. And what I can do here is I can actually adjust the opacity of this adjustment layer, which will allow it to sort of kind of pull down maybe so much the green effects and stuff of it. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a new layer here. And once again, I'm going to hold down Alt and click in between so it's a clipping mask. And I'm going to see if I can't make this side a little bit darker than this side, since the light's coming in from this way. So this is going to be a little tricky. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to take my gradient tool here. And first off, I'm going to Control click on this little picture here, which is going to get my selection here. I'm going to get my gradient tool. And on my gradient tool, I'm going to see if I can't get like a light dark thing here. But I'm going to change my light side to sort of like a yellowish gold color to kind of give it that little idea of sunshine here kind of coming in. And so I'm just going to go like this. Oops, let me make sure I have it set to linear and go in the direction where like the dark side's going to be on that side. Okay, good. All right, and so I'll just Control D, and once again I'm going to take this right here, this mode, and I'll change it to something like soft light here, and maybe even pull the opacity down a little bit here. So you can kind of see like she's a little bit darker now on this side than she is on that side. And I can even take this and maybe change it to something else. Maybe not soft light, maybe overlay. Maybe not overlay, maybe multiply. take the opacity down a little bit more. Okay. All right, that looks kind of good. Maybe even a little bit further here. All right, good. So if we were to sort of like remove these, we can kind of see that now she fits in a bit better with the background in general. All right, cool. So that's a good, quick, easy way of getting your color adjustments and your light adjustments in. The other way of, like, say for instance, making it blend in a little bit more is to just add some just basic, like, paint. So once again, I'm going to make a new layer and make it a clipping mask. And what I'll do is I'll just take my paintbrush tool, and I'm going to get my brush to be pretty soft, and I'll just use black. And I'm going to see if I can get my brush to be a bit bigger. Let's see here. All right, there we go. It's about 400 pixels. I can't see really the brush here, but what I'm going to do is I'm just going to I'm just going to kind of lightly kind of color in some shadows here or there, right? Like so. Maybe some right here. Make it a bit smaller. Right? And what I'll do is I'll get a hard eraser to kind of pull the shadows off of, like, the rub here, and then over here as well. And then what we'll do is, once again, we'll pull the opacity way, way down. So the shadows are more like felt, not seen. So once again, we can kind of see that she's got light coming in on one side and not the other. All right, so it's a good start here. So cool. There's a lot of things we could do to make these things fit, but the biggest thing is making sure the color fits, making sure the color temperature fits, because when you're under different kinds of light, I know you've seen this, your camera and your eyes sort of interpret colors differently. So go ahead and save this as JPEG and turn it into D2L.